That was weird.
Your popcorn's done, Mike.
I guess. Howdy, folks. Happy Friday. Thank God it's Friday. It's a joyous time. Oh, never mind. Not really. If you know me, nothing is joyous. We'll start with the pre-show. Go ahead, Ross.
Nothing like the NFL. Usually a week before the draft, bad things happen. A couple of days before the draft, there's always going to be one or two leaked reports about somebody who's going to be drafted, whether they're smoking pot or whatever.
With the mask.
That hasn't happened yet, but it will. And I'm just letting everybody know that's going to happen because it happens every year.
That happened 2 days before the draft, or
right? That's generally the timing of it. Right. But before that, now we're getting the spoiled NFL players like, I want to be traded or I'm not showing up to camp, guys. And so Baker Mayfield's one of them, and Deebo Samuel, the star wide receiver for San Fran's the other. And so the Mayfield one first. The interesting thing is he's getting paid.
Okay.
But if he sits out of camp long enough and they don't trade him, then he's going to go down that road that Ben Simmons went down in the NBA, where they start finding you every day. It's not incumbent upon the Cleveland Browns to trade him.
Okay, let's go one at a time here because with Baker Mayfield, I have all the sympathy in the world for him because the Cleveland Browns decided he wasn't good enough, and they went out and signed the reprobate Deshaun Watson to a ridiculous contract that we've talked about before in terms of, the signing bonus being the contract being no base pay. So when he gets suspended for 5 or 6 games for what he did in Houston, it's not going to cost him anything. That was their decision. They think he's a better quarterback. Fine. Sorry, Baker Mayfield is a starting quarterback. He's a former number 1 overall pick. He said, he basically, get me out of here. I said goodbye to the fans, trade my ass, and they're not. I don't know if their plan is to have him play the 5 or 6 games.
That is the plan.
Well, I think they signed Tyrod Taylor, didn't they?
Do they want Tyrod Taylor in there for the first 6 games, or the guy they're paying?
No, I think Tyrod Taylor was with the Giants.
Yeah, but it's somebody else. They did sign.
I think it's Jacoby Brissett or something like that. But Kev, I don't have a problem with him trying to force a trade because they decided they wanted somebody else. So trade me.
Yeah, that's just the prerogative of a player, but I also respect the team's right to not trade him. Quarterbacks get hurt all the time. Baker Mayfield in their mind is a good plan B. Maybe they didn't fall in love with him. The other thing I would say, and I'll be interested to get your take, because this is real subjective on my part, but I did cover the Browns a couple or 3 games at the end of my USA Today career, and went down to, a couple practices, did a couple pieces down there. But one thing that strikes me about Baker Mayfield is in the NFL today, almost every NFL quarterback, to me, the standard is 300 yards. Are you a 300-yard passer?
Yeah.
Because that's essentially – guys seem to fall off a log and throw for 300 yards because it's a pass-happy league. Baker Mayfield's not that guy. Like that, he's a 230 to 250 kind of passer. And I don't know that you can win in the NFL unless you can run for 100 yards. Like, right. If you can be that kind of quarterback if you can pass for 250 and run for 100. But I don't know. He's really not that guy. So I wonder how marketable he really is. Now, somebody would take him.
Marketable, that's the
yeah. I don't think he is either. I think there are teams that would take him, but I don't think there's going to be a long line of teams thinking, he's the guy that's going to save us.
Let's just say this: if Sam Darnold is marketable to an NFL team.
Well, he only was to one team though. Technically.
Yeah, I'm sure that there are more than one team. Are you telling me Seattle is not interested in him after they traded?
Not with that salary. No, I don't think so.
Yeah, that's the double kick. Like you're unsold on his ability combined with the salary.
Well, I think what it is not only the salary, but the fact that I believe he's in the final year of the contract. I think they exercised the 50-year option. So if he goes someplace and has a great year, they either have to sign him to a multi-year deal, or they even have to sign him to a multi-year deal before. I mean, that's the whole situation. But the other one,
it's over $18 million, Mike. So like,
right. I'm not saying
was nowhere near that amount of money either.
Yeah, but I don't dispute your point, Mike. I mean, that's his right to, saying, and especially given the fact that they only want him as, a plan B.
Yeah, and the other situation, I mean, I have no sympathy at all for Deebo Samuel, because what he's doing is what Tyreek Hill did in Kansas City. He wanted to be paid. He's a great player. He wants to be paid. I get that. That's fine. Maybe San Francisco can't pay him, so he's required.
No, they said they want to pay him. He cut off the talks.
Okay, so unless this is a ploy to get more money out of them.
This is a ploy to go to a better team.
Well, I mean, does San Francisco strike you as not a good team? I mean, they were in the championship game. I mean,
no, they strike me as a good team. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, but it's hard to gauge how players now assess where they want to go, and it was a lot easier, not all that long ago when you could identify the 3 or 4 teams that had a chance to win, and now the way players see it is just completely different.
I mean, he liked the picture of the Dallas Cowboys on Instagram, so clearly he'd like to go to the Cowboys. Maybe he has a buddy there.
Well, yeah, and what was it? Tyreek Hill wanted to be the highest paid wide receiver in the league. Kansas City couldn't do that because of Mahomes' contract, so they traded him to Miami, where he's now the highest paid receiver in the league. The Bills had a similar thing with Stephon Diggs. He didn't make a big stink about it, but he saw that other wide receivers in the league at his level were getting paid significantly more. So the Bills gave him a 4-year extension, and now everything is good. It's like, I mean, that the contracts in the NFL are almost meaningless sometimes.
I don't say that. I would say your point that you're trying to make is because they're non-guaranteed, but they build in so much signing bonus and everything else.
That's the thing. The signing bonus is what
that they.
And Tyreek Hill's contract is mostly signing bonus. It's like he's not like if he gets cut, all of a sudden he's getting.
They won't be able to.
Yeah. Well, the problem with the poor players in the NFL, they're the group of athletes that need the most protection, and they have the worst protection in all of sports. But the problem is, and it's not, I'm oversimplifying this, and it's not true the way that I'm going to phrase it, but it's the closest I can say is that most players, with the exception of about 35 guys in the league, maybe 50, are expendable. Like they're interchangeable. You have one guy, you have one linebacker, and the next year you got a different linebacker. It's not that, and you got to hope that one linebacker is a little better than the other. So that's the way the NFL has kind of always treated it. Now that's, again, that's an oversimplification, because obviously some players are better than others, and the teams that do well are the teams that can sort of identify that. But I've always felt bad for football players because their careers are short, risk of injury is greater. They don't have any guaranteed contracts, and there's a constant turnover, except in offensive linemen and quarterbacks. They keep quarterbacks for a while, and they keep linemen for a long time. Linemen have lengthy careers. So
here's the other rub. So with Samuel, he had 1,400 yards, 6 touchdowns through the air, 8 touchdowns and 365 yards on the ground. And his thing is, I don't like getting hit on playing running back. And it's like, you know what? Then again, this is a situation where guys, how does he know that Dallas is not going to use him on the ground? They have trouble running the ball too.
His intrinsic value is that he's a dual threat, is that he's a running back and a wide receiver all rolled in one.
He's saying he doesn't like the way they used him. He was great the way they used him. He just doesn't like getting hit. That's a whole other story.
Were you ever a boss, Mike?
No. I was a manager.
Yes. How many people did you manage?
Sorry about that. Something was popping up there. Say that again.
How many people did you manage when you were managing people?
10, 12. Yeah.
Wow. I'd love to talk to those 12 about their experience with you as manager.
I'll put you.
Because you're just so what's the word? Heartless.
Yeah, I'm going to give you a quick story.
Honestly, but this is the point. If you're going to pay this guy $30 million, I want you freaking going out and loading the pop from the like doing everything.
No, but I want to share this with Kevin. I think he'll like this. I was in a software company, like video games, like software, etc., Babbage's, that kind of company, and they had an opening at district manager, and my district manager said, "You got to put Russ in that spot because he's been a rising star this whole time." I was in the company like 3-4 years. He puts me in. And he wants to make a bet at Christmas time because that's where all the money is, all the bonuses are, everything. So we bet all the way down the line, and I'm taking over a bad district, like not a bad one in potential, a bad performing one, and it's miles away from my house. Like it's an hour to the closest store. So we go and we make this bet, and at the end of it, I win the bet. I beat my old district with my old district manager. And I won over all these new people in the new district. And that district manager didn't like me anymore. All of a sudden, it was like I wasn't like his rising star anymore. All of a sudden, it was like, you beat me.
Well, all I can say is
jealousy gets in the way.
All I can say is this before we start the show. One of my best friends, I was her manager at the movie theaters, and if you talk to her, Kev, you'd get a blow by blow of how bad a manager I was. But I think that
on the show.
I refute everything that she says about that. Okay.
Yeah.
Hello, Hockey World. Today is Friday, April 22nd, 2022.
I'm Russ Cohen from Sportsology.
Kevin Allen from HockeyBuzz.
And I'm Michael Agello, and this is the HockeyBuzzcast here on HockeyBuzz.com. Unfortunately, we have to start the show with some really sad news. We'd heard some reports about this earlier in the week, and the Montreal Canadiens, basically asked for everybody to sort of, let the family deal with the situation. But Hall of Famer and hockey legend Guy Lafleur passed away at the age of 70 today. This is coming on the heels of the death of Mike Bossy. It's Kev. I mean, these are players from my youth. These are the players that I watched growing up. Bossy, obviously, in the early 80s with the Islander championship teams, and Lafleur with those great Canadian teams of the late 70s. I mean, I just remember him streaking down the right wing and scoring, and that line with him and Jacques Lemaire and Steve Shutt just wreaking havoc. It's a sad day, really sad day.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of my journalistic career, I only got the tail end. He came back and played in 88, 89 for the Rangers. But, it's funny, he was gone for he missed 3 complete seasons and then came back. And he was 37 years old. Like, he retired young by today's definition at 33. Yeah. But even missing those 3 years, when he came back, he still had a scoring touch.
Yes.
Which is, he had 18 goals.
He had a hat trick in one of those games for the Rangers.
He was. I mean, for a 37-year-old guy who hadn't played in 3 years, he was still just fun to watch, and was a terrific player. But what I really remember more than how I dealt with him journalistically, because I also interviewed him through the years at various functions, and a lot of people have talked about his charm and his charisma on social media today, and that was certainly true. Just his life choices, like he became a helicopter pilot. I know when I did my book on the Stanley Cup, I now can't remember the player, but one of the players actually got him to fly him in the cup around. He just thought, that kind of added to it. And I can't argue having Guy Lafleur as your pilot, as you're squiring the Stanley Cup around the area with his wife. And then it's terrible that I can't remember who it was, but he proposed to his girlfriend also on that flight.
Wow.
It was well. So it was quite a Stanley kind of Cup memory. But, what I started to say is my memories mostly that I love the most aren't my journalism memories of Lafleur. It's what Mike said. When I was a kid, he was the symbol of the Flying Frenchman. And the speed, like I'm sure there are players today who are as fast as Guy Lafleur. But back then, he seems so fast.
The only guy who seemed faster was Cornway. That's
right. The Roadrunner was so quick, but he seems so fast because the game moved a little slower than it moves today. Today, the speed. So many guys are fast that it's. You notice when one guy is a little bit quicker, but it's not as pronounced as it was in the 70s, and I think that's why the image that we all have of him, as Mike said, is just streaking down, and he had longish, not real long, but longish hair, and it would just fly behind him, and the jersey would flap as he went down, and he had the big shot today. You know, the one thing I always say, the great goal that he scored against Gilbert, that today we would call that a terrible goal, but
the only goal that's similar to that one is the Radko Gudas goal that we saw a couple weeks ago in Florida when he came over the blue line shorthanded. That was Rick Vive, Lafleur, Bossy. They all scored coming down the right wing with that blast. But to your point, Cornway looked fast because of his unusual skating style. He was very, a lot of motion. Lafleur was smooth. He was
fluid. Yeah,
he was fluid. And the reason that you knew he was fast is because he was blowing by everybody like they were standing still. He
had a game speed that didn't exist in the game then, and you could see it. Yeah. I hated it in '79 because I knew it was going to beat the Rangers.
Right.
And it did. But I watched them before that, and you know, you can't have anything but respect and just awe. But I did get to cover him in the Heritage Classic, and it was fun because I got to see him practicing with his old buddies. I got to see him even in a big, I think it was an auditorium kind of like a pre-tournament thing. He was up on stage and he was talking, and Gretzky was talking, and all of a sudden they started answering questions together, and Gretzky was kind of like a little kid with Guy Lafleur there. I may have to pull out that audio because it was a lot of fun. I was actually sitting next to like Janet Gretzky listening to all this. It was like, you know, it was hard to believe. And it was hard to believe when I was in that, even the Canadiens locker room 30 years after, 20 years after these guys were great players. And I still was like a little kid. Like I was just like, it was hard to keep composure and talk to these guys because every guy on that Heritage Classic, I forgot what they called it. They were like, not the superpowers. I forgot what they called the teams, but everybody on that Canadiens team was a star. Every one of them had won a cup, at least one. They probably had 2 or 3 to their name, most of them.
Well, I have to say, like, because you obviously know from my like hatred of Wayne Gretzky, but I usually demonize the great players that were not on the team that I rooted for. But there were notable exceptions. Bossy was one of them. He was just a classy player, and Lafleur was another. And it gave me great pleasure in '81 when the Canada Cup occurred and Lafleur was on a line with Gretzky and Gilbert Perreault, and that line was incredible. It dominated, and then Perreault broke his ankle, I believe, and they replaced him with Marcel Dion, and that was the game that the Canadiens lost to the Russians 8-1 with Mike Liut in goal. So, I mean, I always respected and always was in awe of Lafleur's ability. He was just an incredible talent. I just looked up the stats, 6 straight 50 or more goal seasons, and then it tailed off. But when he left the Rangers, Russ, and he went to Quebec the following year, he only played 39 games. He had 34 points as a 37-year-old.
No, listen, I was living in Virginia when the Rangers, and I couldn't watch him on TV because there was no coverage. So I was reading the New York Times, and I went to an occasional game at the old Potato Chip in Washington, but that was like a 2.5-hour ride. I loved it. I loved every minute of it. I knew when they were going to sign him. I was just like, I can't believe this. It's great. And like Kevin said, he exceeded expectations, which is hard to do for a guy named Guy Lafleur, but he did. One other thing about that Heritage Classic thing, I was waiting out in the cold for these 2 buses to show up, right? So they could go to practice and we could interview guys. So I called someone because there happened to be a payphone. And while I'm on this payphone call, one of the buses pulls up. First guy off is Guy Lafleur. And of course he went and had a cigarette. And right after that, then he went in and got dressed and went and skated. And I'm sure that was his normal game day function.
Yeah. Kev, I've heard stories about Guy Lafleur during games in between periods.
Yeah,
smoking a couple cigarettes.
Oh, so many players did. I told the story this morning, but when he came back and with the Rangers, like early in my career, a lot of players smoked. Especially players from Quebec. Mary Lemieux smoked for a very short time. It was just a commonplace thing. There was a smoking room in the locker room, and guys would light up between periods, or after the game and so forth. But a lot of guys ended up quitting, obviously, into the 80s. But when Guy came back, he was still smoking. I remember one of the interviews I did with him right after he came back. He was sitting there having a cigarette, talking to me about things. But the word that came out a lot this morning, if you've read social media, is elegant. He was an elegant skater. He was a majestic skater. Mike alluded to that before. When you watched him, it was smooth. It wasn't prodding. He wasn't like pounding out to get down the ice. It was like he was gliding. It was, and it was electrifying. The phrase we use is he brought people out of their seats, which has become a cliche. When Guy played, that was just true. Like you could hear there was a buzz, and the buzz you would hear it even on the television on Hockey Night in Canada. And it would get louder, and as he started down the ice, and the chants in the forum of Guy, and Zeisberger, the writer who's now I guess with NHL.com, but was in Toronto, told just a delightful story, which I thought really kind of summed up, and it speaks to what Mike was talking about, how he still liked and admired Lafleur playing for an opposing team. Zeisberger said when he was a kid growing up in the Toronto area, Lafleur was the only non-Toronto player that people would call to be when they were playing hockey. Like I'm Guy Lafleur today, and nobody would say, you're not going to be that rat. He's with an opposing team. So.
But he was a protected player too, right, Kev? I mean, I saw if you touch Guy Lafleur, Larry Robinson or one of those guys went after you for sure.
Name one player that wasn't a protected player.
I know.
A star player. I mean, stars are just the way it is. Now, I will say, well, that'll get me off on another tangent.
No. I'll just say this in terms of, this is good stuff to talk about. In terms of star players being protected players, especially in that era, some of them did. I mean, Bobby Orr stuck up for himself after Pat Quinn laid him out in that playoff. I think it was in 1970. He came back and he got into a fight against Quinn. I think it was against Quinn.
Yeah, he was a fighter early in his career.
Right.
Yeah.
Brad Park fought a lot.
He had a lot of fights, actually.
Gilbert Perreault, who was a star in Buffalo and a Hall of Famer, he fought like Brian Watson and Dan Maloney and beat them both. And then I don't remember him ever fighting after that, because when you take on two of the toughest guys in the league and beat them, nobody's going to challenge you to a fight.
Yeah, I'm not sure Brian Watson. I mean, Brian Watson was a great irritator. I'm not sure he was a great fighter. It's like Keith Magnuson had enthusiasm for the project, but he was not a great fighter. I remember in Gordie Howe Day in Detroit, true story, on the front page of Gordie Howe Day, there's Nick Libet and Keith Magnuson in a fight. And so the story goes, the people in the press box were thinking, well, who's going to win this? It's two guys who never, ever won a fight in their life. So, anyway, that was well before my time. I was a fan then, but I've heard that story, since that. Just an incredible player. And the double sadness is that the hockey world loses Guy Lafleur on the heels of Mike Bossy. Right. So we have two legendary. Mike just read off over 6 consecutive years, 50 or more goals. We know what Bossy did, 9 years of that as well. So in a space of a week, we've lost two of the more dynamic scorers in NHL history. It's just a sad time. And again, Lafleur's personality, the charm, he was a little bit impish when you'd interview him a little bit, but mostly he was charming. Very, very classy guy. It was some stars are a little, unapproachable, but that was certainly not Guy. This is a terrible loss. And, as many people wrote this morning, cancer sucks. It's as simple as that.
It really does. It really does. And I'm sure Montreal plays at home on Sunday against the Boston Bruins. They're playing Saturday night in Ottawa. I'm sure they'll have a moment of silence in Ottawa, but they'll have a presentation in Montreal honoring Lafleur. That'll probably be second to none. So that'll be something to watch. Let's jump to what we have left in basically a week left in the regular season. We still have a race in the West. We'll talk about that first because Dallas is really sort of dropping the ball here in terms of locking up a playoff spot. And they've opened the door for Vegas to step in, because Dallas lost last night, and I'm just looking. I believe they lost to Calgary.
You mean they lost a game in hand, Mike? That doesn't happen.
Yeah.
How does that happen?
Yes, somebody who's not on the show right now. Yeah, it was Calgary beat them 4-2.
Yeah.
So now they have 91 points at 78 games, and Vegas has 89 points at 78 games. I don't think that Vegas can catch LA, but I do think that they can catch Dallas now. It's within the realm of possibility.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about how soft the LA schedule was down the stretch. They weren't likely, even if they lost one of those games, they were still going to be fine. But, that was a big loss. It was not an unexpected loss. I mean, Calgary's a very good team, and trying to beat them in Calgary just made that challenge even greater. But opening the door, I think that's the great phrasing of that. They're not through yet, the Golden Knights, but certainly looks better than it did the other night. They were obviously the biggest Flames fan last night as they were, watching. So that overtime win that Vegas got the other night, that was important to them. Had they not gotten that extra point.
Oh, yeah. No, it is. I mean, but this is the hard part, like Kev always says about, where we're trying to predict and we're doing a daily show, because my initial thought was Vegas is going to make it, Dallas isn't. And then the way it kind of got shook around, I was thinking, all right, maybe Dallas is going to make it and maybe the Kings aren't. Now I look at it and I'm like, yeah, I think the Kings are going to make it. I think my initial thought of Vegas making it and Dallas not making it may have been the right thought. But, this is the roller coaster you get put on.
One thing we do know, Russ, the Islanders didn't make it. I'm just kidding.
Right.
Yeah.
But it is. It's the roller coaster you go on. But it's an interesting thing, because if Dallas makes it into the playoffs, there are not going to be that many teams worried about Dallas. Yeah. But if Vegas makes it, there will be teams not wanting to match up against Vegas.
Well,
that's for
sure. The statement that Daryl Sutter made a couple days ago, and it was humorous, that whoever comes up against Colorado, basically it's a waste of 8 days, because that team is not going to beat Colorado. Well, if Vegas sneaks in on the second wild card, they're playing Colorado, and I'm not saying that they'll beat Colorado, but I'm sure that the Avalanche, I'm sure Joe Sakic and Jared Bednar are saying, I'd rather play the Dallas Stars than Vegas.
Yes, I agree with that. It's not something they talk about a lot. I think it's something fans talk about more, but I agree that they all have their opinions on who they'd rather play, although it's not for the reasons that we usually talk about. Right. For them, it's about problems it causes for individual players. Maybe they might have one checker that seems to bottle up their top player and all that. I ended up talking about this at length with Tom Laidlaw, and that's what he kind of pointed out. Like, it's not that, it's not, we don't want to play them because we can't beat them. It's usually, well, I hate playing them because, they buzz around and they're hard to keep track of, or, there's just something about them that causes problems for the team, as opposed to, we just can't beat them. But I agree with you. I think Vegas and Dallas do meet coming up, right?
Next Tuesday.
Yeah, that pretty much will decide it, don't you think?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So, at least they got that going. I mean, I think, that's the most fair way to do it.
Although if you're Dallas, you don't mind if that game goes into overtime, though.
No, for sure. Yeah. Well, provided you're going to win it. But
but even just getting to overtime could keep them at arm's length in the end.
Sure. Yeah, because then they can only gain a point. So, but it's hard even to figure out the tiebreaker, because they were just one win apart last time I looked.
But Kev, I'm telling you, I think the turning point for Dallas was when Rick Bowness smashed that stick, because he was getting close to being fired. The word was his job was in jeopardy. The team was on a big losing streak. And I don't know the record since he smashed the stick, but I know it's a lot better than before they smashed the stick.
I'm sure it's in the notes.
Yeah. And Russ, that sort of coincided with them going heavy with Ottinger as their number one.
Yes, I think that was the other criticism that I had of Dallas is that they were doing too much ping-ponging with Ottinger, and he was clearly going to be their goalie of the future. Why not just stick with him? And I think you're right. I think they did finally figure that part out. Yeah,
the Vegas situation too, that amuses me. I just had this discussion on another show as well about, and I've alluded here that over the last few years, everything that I've learned about hockey through the years, is eroding. The importance of experience, and you got to learn how to lose in the playoffs where you can win. All these things that through the years I've sort of learned and doing, and they've turned out to they're just less true. They're not entirely not true, just less true than we are in before. And one of them is the importance of an experienced goaltender. I look at Vegas now, and Logan Thompson has stepped up, and he's got no business stepping up by the standards that we used to have with regard to, for the same reason Minnesota wants Fleury, the experience that he has. Well, Logan Thompson has none of that.
Right.
Has no pedigree.
No, he's just a good scrappy goalie. That's all he ever was.
He's just done a really good job.
Right. And we saw comments from Gerard Gallant yesterday about him really criticizing Leonard and how he'd been playing over the last couple games, and then he blamed him for a loss, and then he pulled Leonard.
Gallant didn't blame him for a loss.
DeBoer. I'm sorry, DeBoer. Thank you. But yeah, DeBoer pulled Leonard in favor of Thompson in the first period of the game against the Capitals. So is this a crisis of confidence when it comes to?
No, DeBoer does that to kind of push buttons. He's been known to do that with goalies. And so I think he's really just trying to push Leonard's buttons to get the most out of him. I don't think he wants to go into the playoffs with Logan Thompson. He will if he has to, but I don't think that's his plan. So I think he wants to get Leonard playing right. That's what I think he wants.
So right now in the Pacific, Calgary's got first place locked. Edmonton is 2 points ahead of LA, but LA has played 2 more games. So it looks like right now that's a lock, LA and Edmonton in the first round match. In the Central Division, Colorado and Florida are battling for the President's Trophy. Colorado has got an 11-point lead on both Minnesota and St. Louis.
Now that is a lock.
That is a lock. Minnesota and St. Louis is a lock. It's just a question now of home ice advantage, and I don't know how much that really matters in that series. Although, again, basically saying that he had talked about the stat. I don't remember him talking about the stat, but the fact that St. Louis is 9-0-1 against Minnesota in the last 10 regular season games, that has to be a little bit in the mind of.
But if Fleury was there for,
I know, but Kev, the thing is, they've continued to play Talbot. They're playing Fleury, but they've continued to play Talbot. I don't know whether this is a situation where they're just trying not to load a lot of games on Fleury. But I'm puzzled by it.
No, it is, but I do think it's an unusual situation because, you don't have the normal circumstance where a coach feels obligated to play a guy just based on the fact that his general manager acquired him. I think the way they feel now, look, everybody was on board on this, so I think everyone's comfortable just getting a feel on a game-by-game basis who should get in. So I still think now Fleury's going to get in. You look at his record, he's winning, which is all they really need, and he does have the experience. And I think that'll be why they do that. I did want to bring up
that's a long series too, in my view.
Yeah, that's
good. Yeah, for sure. So, and we'll kind of see what happens on that. But I want to talk a little bit about the Oilers again. I've been talking about them for a while, about how well, again, I was alerted by a couple of scouts who had seen them a lot, who said, the Oilers are really playing well. No one seems to be paying much attention to them, but they've sort of kind of got it together. But I saw a statistic. It was by Sportsnet Stats, and it really kind of struck me, and it just reminded me of the Oilers' history, that Smith has won 7 in a row, and that's the 4th longest goalie streak in Edmonton Oilers history. So The reason why I think that's interesting is what it tells you is because they've had good quality goaltenders. I mean, they had Grant Fuhr, they had Andy Moore, they've had Ranford. But what that tells you is they have never been goalie centric for their entire franchise history. They have never been, goalie centric. They're a team that, they're about scoring. They've always sort of been about scoring. So.
Yeah, I think the only team you could say that they weren't about scoring was that team that made the Stanley Cup final in 2006. And because in the end they had like UC Mark.
Yeah, but that was a happenstance team. That was a momentum team.
Right. Yeah. Fernando Pisani is your leading scorer. Yeah. Mike Pekka and Chris.
They had a good bunch of guys.
Yeah. So anyway, I mean, it is going to be fun. I think they're going to be an entertaining team. I saw another stat that I thought I should bring up too. They looked at the Connor McDavid's draft here and looked at the number of playoff games.
I saw it.
That was a fun stat. And
it's not fun for Eichel, but it's a fun stat.
No, what isn't fun for Connor McDavid either.
No, not really.
But for what we're talking about, for those who didn't see the stat, it was on social media and it got passed around quite a bit. But from that draft class, what is that? 2015? What?
Yeah, 2015.
2015 draft, the guys who have played the most games out of that draft, of course, are Tampa Bay Lightning guys. Right. And then I thought it was interesting too that
Mitch Marner's got like 24 games because he's made the playoffs,
right?
Or more than that, actually. I think it's over 30 because they've made the playoffs every year, but just they haven't gotten by the first round.
Yeah, but the point is DeBrusque, for example, has a ton of games.
Right. They made the
and Connor McDavid sitting down there at 21, and Jack Eichel sitting down with 0. So, that's
inconceivable from the time he was drafted. If you'd have told me, hey, Russ, this guy's not going to play a playoff game, and he's not going to be on Buffalo anymore when he maybe plays his first playoff game, I'd have told you were drunk. Like, I would have flat out told you that.
And for a guy who's averaged 27 or 28 goals per season.
Yeah.
That's just really ridiculous. But
I'll give you another stat that's enlightening. In that draft, the top 5 of that draft, 3 of the 5 players have been traded, and some more than one. Eichel's been traded, Dylan Strom has been traded, and Noah Hannifin's been traded. So, and normally that doesn't happen. Normally those guys stay around for at least a little while. Right now, the only 2 players that are on the original team that they were drafted is Connor McDavid and Mitch Marner.
Yeah.
So here's the question. Maybe it's for Russ and for you to weigh in too, Mike, because I brought this up and I just raised it because I don't have the answer to this. We know Dylan Strom was on the trading block earlier in the season, but he's had 21 goals.
Yeah.
And, they're in a semi-rebuild mode, not full, but semi. Now, are they still going to trade him? And
no, I don't think so.
I don't think so. And I wanted to talk about Chicago.
I think getting rid of Hagel means that he's safe.
We'll talk about Chicago in a minute because I wanted to.
Well, let me ask my question first because you guys kind of cut me off before I could get there. Are they going to trade him? I know The Athletic wrote a story, and I didn't read it yet about whether they would trade him or not. But are they willing to pay him based on this season? And maybe that is a determining factor. I have no idea. I'm just speculating.
Okay, I'll just say that.
Hold on. Let me just finish the question.
I'm sorry.
Okay. Let me get the question out. So, are they willing to do that? And if so, because there's so few centers in there, would he be a plan B? In other words, do you believe in Strom after a 21-goal season?
Well, he had another previous year that he was good, and that earned him this bridge deal that he has. I think he had 38 points in 58 games, and 51 points the year before that, and they gave him a decent contract. It was a bridge deal. I think he's making around $4 million. I mean, I think his fate in Chicago is tied to what they do this summer, because there are a lot of people who believe they're either going to buy out or trade Jonathan Taves and maybe even Patrick Kane. If they both have no move clauses, but if they move on from Taves, they have to have somebody to play center, and Dylan Strom is 25 years old. So I would think his fate is tied to what direction they're going to go in, Russ.
I think they have to keep him. I think they have to pay him. There's centers don't grow on trees. You're not going to be able to draft one and instantly put him in Dylan Strom's spot. Mike's right about Taves. I think Strom has made developmental steps since he was drafted, and I think that's what the difference is between that 20-goal year and this 21-goal year. I think Chicago's done a pretty good job with him in rehabbing a guy that was rushed to the NHL. So I think what you see now is maybe not what everybody was hoping when he was drafted, but close enough that you say, all right, we can't get rid of him. He's a very useful center in this league, and he's got youth on his side still.
Yeah, and I also think the factor here is, Kev, because, obviously if they move on from Kane and Taves, the core of this team now is the young core led by DeBrincat, led by Kirby Dach, and in part by Strom. They have to sign DeBrincat. DeBrincat's got 1 year left in his contract. He's got 45 goals this year. They're going to have to invest some.
They'll sign him. They'll sign him.
Why you would think so?
Yeah, that's not even it. They'll get him signed. I don't know. I mean, I agree with you. I think they will keep him, but I think they have a hard time giving him the money that he's going to want. So,
it depends. It depends on what he wants. If he wants like $7 million, then forget it. If he wants five and a half, 6. I think that they would.
Yeah, I think that's where I think they're going to have trouble with.
Maybe they shouldn't have given Murphy what he's given.
Well,
yeah. Well, I don't think there's a chance they would never buy out Patrick Kane.
No,
valuable. I don't. Taves just didn't get anything done this year.
I think Kane is there for the duration. I think Taves could be a guy that gets traded to Winnipeg. I do.
Well, okay.
I really do.
I'm not sure. I think a buyout's more likely.
Yeah, I mean this Kane either stays and signs an extension or gets traded in the summer because he's entering the last year of his contract.
I'm gonna just be like a fortune teller and say that his little speech about wanting to end his career was calculated.
Yes.
And I think he knows something.
He got 90 points this year. He's still
That's why I'm saying they're not moving him.
Right.
You've got Seth Jones there, so you can't do a total rebuild anyway.
No.
So why not keep a guy who's known still to this day as one of the most competitive players in the league, a guy that always gives his best, always wants to be the best. I wouldn't move him at all. But it's sad what Taves has become in terms of a player.
Yeah.
And you just don't know what that illness took out of him, obviously.
Yeah, that will never know.
And that's the thing. Maybe he just plays out the last year of his contract. We know the direction that they're going in. The one thing that's stark about the Blackhawks, you look at it, they have no goaltenders. I mean, none. Lankinen is a UFA. They traded Fleury. They have no goalies. That's Russ. That's where I think somebody like Peter Mrazek ends up because they have literally no goaltender.
Mike, that is your pipe dream. He's not going to end up there.
Well, maybe he's going to end up somewhere. We'll see that. But yeah, Chicago is. I mean, I wrote about this a couple days ago. I mean, and we'll just do this and then go to the East in terms of the playoff races. I look at them, Kev, and you look at this organization that won 3 Stanley Cups in the last 12 years, and now how that organization has just been like eviscerated because of the Kyle Beach situation and everything that was tied to it. Now Bowman is gone and Kyle Davidson is there, and I think the deals that they made at the deadline are clearly aimed at, a rebuild because they moved a 24-year-old guy like Hagel for 2 draft picks and 2 players at the same age as Hagel. So they're going to remake this team and they're going to try to do it fairly quickly, but I don't think it's going to be like 1 year and all of a sudden they're going to be a playoff contender again.
No, I agree with that. I wouldn't call it a rebuild, or just a partial rebuild or remaking it. It seems like the better phrasing, because they just were incapable of doing that because they have too many long-term commitments there.
Right.
But they're going to make some significant changes, and I think part of that is going to be to get a goalie in there. I was actually surprised that they didn't do anything at the trade deadline to try to get a young goalie. Maybe someone like Georgiev, if the Rangers are going to move him,
or Sam
I
Sonoff.
think they're going to move him.
Or Sam Sonoff.
You may be right, Russ. So
a Sam Sonoff from Washington. If somebody like that. I mean, but that it would be perfect for them to go out and get a young goaltender who they could sort of build around, who could play a lot of games. But a lot of teams are looking for that type of goaltender. But yeah, I think that there are decent players there. Some who have taken a step back this year, like Kubalik is not having a good year. Notch has only got 9 goals, so he's sort of stepped back, and he's only 20 years old, Russ.
No, but again, this is a guy who, similar to Dylan Strom, they had rushed to the league.
Yeah.
And because he's got size, they're like, he can handle it. He's big. Don't worry.
Right.
And he's not developing. Now, he will develop, but he may never develop into what he might have been, because now you've thrown him in there too early. He's learned some bad habits, and it's going to be tough for him now. I don't know if he's going to be a 30-goal scorer now. I don't know. But they have, he was counted on as being like the Taves replacement, their number 1 center. And right now that's shaky ground.
Now, the race in the Metro right now, the Carolina Hurricanes and the Rangers are tied at 108 points. Pittsburgh's in 3rd place. Washington's sort of on their heels. Sticking with the Rangers and Carolina, they play next Tuesday is the big day, Russ, because that's the day of Vegas, Dallas. It's also the day of Rangers and Carolina at Madison Square Garden. So that's a big game in terms of home ice advantage.
Yeah, that's a big one, and I think both teams will try and bring it. I do want to answer Thomas. I don't know DeFore from the St. John Sea Dogs. I just don't. There's some players I don't know, Thomas. So sorry, can't give you any. The only thing I can say is with that many points, never having that many points, beware of Pavel Brendel. Anyhow.
By the way, I want the rookie card as long as it's rated or like a 10 rated card. Send it to me.
Right.
Yeah.
It can't be though because it's you. But getting back to the Carolina game, it'll be a pretty big game. What Carolina has to figure out though is it worth it to win the Metro and having to play Freddie Anderson in that game? Because I don't know what the answer is going to be on that. If it were me, I would just let not play Anderson and just let everything happen that's going to happen, because I need Freddie Anderson healthy for the playoffs.
Every report that I've heard has said Anderson's not going to play until the beginning of the playoffs. I mean, it says the MRI was negative, but they said they were going to check back in a week. Well, the week I think is this weekend.
Well, I mean, both teams will have home ice for the first round, but they could have home ice for longer, Carolina, if they win. And you have to wonder, is it worth it to play your goalie for that? I mean, I'm sure they're going to have a discussion.
Yeah.
My take on that situation is this. There are 2 trendy thoughts as we track toward the playoffs. One is that the Rangers could win it all. Yeah. And the thing that's also tracking is that Carolina may not be real. And I find myself agreeing with both of those statements. And the Carolina, I really like. I like their defense. I think Freddie Anderson's had an exceptional year.
Yes.
Their offense is fine. They've got enough scoring. It's not unbelievable. They haven't scored like Minnesota has scored this year, but they seem to have enough there. But there's something about them when I watch them play. They don't wow me. The Rangers do wow me. I
get that.
Yeah, when I see the Rangers and their trade deadline acquisitions have all worked out.
Especially Copp. Copp has been.
Copp's been terrific.
The whole panel knew that that's a perfect fit. It was going to be a perfect fit.
Yeah. Now there's lots of rumors that he's already going to extend there, which people in Detroit are going to be very disappointed about.
Yes, that's what I was saying the other day, Kat. They're going to give him the Strom money, and Strom's going to be a UFA.
And the player that that they got from the Panthers, whose name all of a sudden has just
Frank Vetrano.
Frank Vetrano's been really good.
He's a really good player, although he's really an interesting guy. He's very skilled, and he can skate, and so he fits in, and he gets and he makes tremendous contributions. But what ends up happening with him on the long term, this is at least my theory, is he's skilled enough that he wants to be paid more because he really does contribute a lot.
Right.
But then you can't convince yourself, yeah, like we need him and we like him and he's valuable, but I don't want to make him one of my premium guys.
Right.
Then you want to move him. So
I think the differentiation there is he's got top 9 talent, but he wants to be paid like top 6 talent.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. I look at it this way. I do think the Rangers could get to the conference finals with what they have. Getting over that hump may be hard. I think the only issue I have with Carolina, besides Freddie Anderson in the playoffs, if you want to say they're not real, it does seem like they have trouble scoring when they're behind and it's crunch time, like they have to do it. They seem to be a team that's still better playing with the lead. I don't know if that's true. I don't have the numbers to support it, but it seems that way for the eye test. And that's the difference. The Rangers are different because even though Carolina may score the same amount or a similar amount of goals, the Rangers have a lot more scoring potential that could come back in a game. Like Panarin, how many times have we seen him? You could say, I could text Mike, he's doing nothing for 2.5 periods, and then all of a sudden he gets on the scoreboard.
And then he scores the overtime.
Right.
The game against the Leafs that I saw, Panarin was an absolute zero, didn't do anything. You didn't even notice him. And then he scored the overtime goal to win the game. So that's
right. And Zibanejad has that shot, which once in a while, when he's feeling it, and, it's again, when a guy's in his zone and they can feed him that, it can get past a lot of goalies. I think that's the difference between Carolina and the Rangers. Svechnikov hasn't become that guy yet.
Right.
And I think they have to live with that system that they have, and they have to keep it tight, and they've got to play it physical. And, and again, I'm not in love with Freddie Anderson. So I think there's a lot of truth to it, Kevin.
What's interesting about Svechnikov, and again, this is just a feeling I have. Maybe the numbers don't bear this out, although I think they do. And that is Svechnikov seemed more dangerous when he was younger than he does now.
Well, I think a year ago he seemed more dangerous.
He had a serious injury. I mean, in his second year, and maybe that affected him. The other races, Pittsburgh right now is only 2 points ahead of Washington for third place in the Metro. Pittsburgh won 4-0 last night.
That was a big win.
Yeah, with Casey DeSmith getting the shutout.
Something Mike said could never happen. Casey DeSmith winning a big
win. That's why it was such a big win. I mean, the trust in DeSmith right now. And, it was interesting. Prior to that game, I don't know if it was the morning skate or the day before, Mike Sullivan, I thought uncharacteristically, went out of his way to praise DeSmith, which I thought, he must feel that he needs this or something, because it just didn't seem, he just started talking. They were asking questions, and he just, basically said that the team believed in what he could do, and then obviously they ended up getting that big win. But part of coaching is knowing what you need to do to help that particular player on any given day. So
I mean, I've been around that team a little bit more than some other teams because of tournaments I've been at and in the locker room because they're always in the playoffs. The one thing I could say, Kev, is I always had a feeling that they do believe in DeSmith. Like Mike will always say, well, Casey DeSmith, like they got to get rid of him. They got to get a better goalie. And they don't seem to do it every year. There has to be a reason. And I've seen them have good games. I have. So
let me explain my point there, Russ. If Casey DeSmith is your starter, then you're in trouble. But if he's a fine backup, it's like they may have no option here. I mean, Sullivan might be bucking him up because they know that Jari is going to be out longer than usual, and that DeSmith is the guy for the playoffs. So that might be the reason why they're sort of like pumping him up as we believe in this guy. I mean, that just makes a lot of sense. Now the other, and okay, I know that it's a game with a week left. I know that Austin Matthews did not play. They kept him, even though it looks like Austin Matthews is 100% healthy. The Leafs didn't insert him or Jake Muzzin in the lineup. They played Eric Shalgren instead of Jack Campbell. But Kev, when the team that you're going to play in the first round, it looks like for sure they're going to play Tampa Bay, and Tampa Bay opens up a can of whoop ass and beats them 8-1. And now the Leafs pushed back physically. That got dirty in the second and the third period, so they stuck up for themselves. But if you wanted to, if Tampa Bay wanted to send a message that they're there and they're back, they just did.
Well, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, you're right. Like, I think they wanted to make sure that Toronto knew they could still be the team that won the cup twice. But I've watched them pretty closely, and I think you have too. Yes. They are not the same team. They have not played like that. I mean, they rose up.
Toronto was missing key elements.
Yeah. And I just think that's going to be a much tighter series than we think it is.
Sheldon Keefe came out and said, obviously they were the more desperate team. That meant more to them because they wanted to lock up third place or maybe put a little pressure on the Leafs because now they're 6 points behind Toronto. So, Toronto didn't play all their guys, but I just think that, they sort of sleptwalked through that game, and only when they started getting pushed around by Tampa did they sort of wake up. And
I'll tell you what bothered me about that game, Mike.
Yep.
Was the coverage of the fake fight between Simmons and Maroon, because that was a staged fight.
Well, okay.
It happened.
I didn't want to go into this, but it's like, because we saw the Tim Peel response on social media to Leah Hextall, because Leah Hextall was in between the benches. Simmons and Maroon were jabber-jawing back and forth. Maroon said, "How many Stanley Cup rings do you have?" He was doing this, and then a few minutes later they fought, and I didn't hear the Leah Hextall thing where she said that Simmons was soft. That was
I did, but I think that was a setup, Mike. I think that whole interview was a setup to get Simmons to talk about Maroon because they hadn't fought.
Right.
And by saying the word soft and by Simmons saying he had never obliged me, it was a guarantee after that it was going to happen. And so it did happen. The Tim Peel thing, I'm not even worried about Tim Peel. He was a Neanderthal on that, and that was dumb. But this was basically a staged fight set up off a media interview, which I don't understand why we're still doing that in this sport. Because if you watch the fight, it wasn't a good fight.
It was a terrible fight. They really didn't do anything. And Kev, the thing was, it was a staged fight for ESPN.
Yes.
That game was
That's what it was.
Yeah, it was an 8:00 start. So there was no that was the thing I had a problem with. It was the latest. It started at 8:15 Eastern time. That's the latest start since I remember they used to start Hockey Night in Canada games at 8:00 back in the day. But not in the last 20 years do I remember an Eastern time zone game starting at 8:15. And it was all because of the bull crap that ESPN was pumping up before the game. And then, you basically, like Russ said, had a staged fight. It's like, I mean, what's going on here?
Yeah, we don't need that. We've outgrown that. You don't mind a fight that grows out of the competition, but yeah, I don't have any use for that. And I don't know. I will say Lee Hextall ends up at the center of a lot of discussion about things.
She does. I don't think it's her fault. I think, again, it's because she has a job that a lot of guys probably feel like they can do, and she does a very good job. Her last name's Hextall, and I think it makes her a little bit of a target, unfortunately.
Yeah, if a relative of Felix Potvin was around, she should worry. But
I've talked to her. She's really good, down to earth.
Sharp. She's great.
Hockey.
Yeah. But you don't need contrived emotion. There was enough real emotion in that game, and late in that game, guys like Michael Bunting, guys like Simmons and Kyle Clifford were going after certain Tampa Bay players. One of them being Corey Perry, and if your memory is short, Corey Perry is the guy who took out John Tavares. It wasn't on purpose, but he's the one who did.
All right, hold on. We got breaking news here.
Go ahead.
Jesse Granger says Robin Leonard's undergoing season-ending surgery.
Oh, my goodness. So Logan Thompson.
Logan Thompson is the guy.
Yeah.
Wow.
And again, I'm just going to tell you and we talked about Logan Thompson about 2 weeks ago. I remember bringing him up because I was talking about him with someone offline, and he always had this scrappy nature about him, right? Not like a super great goalie. He's not, but because this guy is a battler, maybe the team will actually solidify for him. Like they'll say, all right, look, we've got to do better because we've got a young kid back here and there's no safety net. This is it.
Russ, here's the pathway for Logan Thompson. He played 4 years with the Brandon Wheat Kings of the WHL, undrafted. Played for Brock University for a year.
Right. Yeah, we talked about this. Yeah.
Yeah, and two years in the ECHL, 3 years in the AHL, and in 15 games right now, 256 goals against, 9-5 record, 920 save percent.
Yeah, I wrote about him 2 weeks ago for a collectibles article saying go collect his cards and now especially he's a starter in the playoffs. But just getting back to the play, I think they have a chance with him. But I also think, Kev, like it doesn't happen as much anymore where all of a sudden the teams really unify for the backup. But I think because there was some rockiness going on there with Leonard clearly, that they could get behind Thompson. I do.
Yeah, well, I don't think that really matters whether they're behind him or not. I think here's the things that points that I would raise. First of all, he's exactly the age that they say goalies come up. So whether he came with a pedigree or not, he's arrived he's 25, right? Yeah. And that's about the time they always say when a goalie is ready to go. Number two, he's played well. Like I think that's why this team is going to be fine with him, just because he's got the job done, and sometimes young guys don't know what they don't know. And I also think historically we've had other goalies, I'm thinking of Tim Thomas in particular, who have taken a unique path and kind of showed up in the NHL, but they've been successful where they've been before. They haven't been anointed as top prospects, but once they get there, they're as good as guys who are top prospects, and they just do the job. So I don't know that they're at a real disadvantage simply because he's played enough games where the team is comfortable with him. And I've seen the comments from players, and they seem to like him. So I don't know. I didn't think that Leonard had played well, and I think maybe this could end up being a relief for the guys
that's sort of the long road that I took, is that I think there is something to that.
Yeah.
And apparently Laurent Brasseau is also hurt. I know that, so that means them probably calling up another goaltender from the AHL. So it's probably Logan Thompson.
And Dylan Ferguson probably.
No, not that. Well, he's only played 13 games. It's a Yuri Patera is the other.
Oh, Yuri Patera. I saw him play in the USHL. That was a couple of years ago. I mean, he's not terrible.
So this is a throwback to their inaugural season, Kev, when they were playing Oscar Dansk and
Oscar Dansk, yeah.
So, and I don't know where Oscar Dansk is, but if he's still skating, they probably will sign him.
I mean, Oscar, he was the goalie for McDavid. He was the goalie in Erie. He had a pretty big pedigree coming into the NHL, and it just didn't fully work out for him. But
this is okay. This is an understatement. A lot of weight is going to be on Logan Thompson's shoulders. But just to illustrate Kev's point, Jordan Binnington was loaned out to another AHL team. He was playing for Providence, I believe, before he got his opportunity in January and took a team that was last place in the NHL standings in December to win the Stanley Cup. So
I will tell you this. There's one thing about goalies, and this is where I know Kevin's talked about this, the change in coaching and development of players on and off the ice for the last decade. And that means just when they go off for the summer, even just being with whoever their coach is locally. A lot of goalies do come into this league not overwhelmed by the situation. They just do their job. Like they just are programmed to do their job. And honestly, you don't see that many situations where it's too big for a goalie, and that's why he loses if he's like, a guy with not a pedigree. So he just has had good training.
Yeah.
All right. Great show, guys. We'll be back on Monday with another edition of the Hockey Buzzcast. For Kevin Allen, for Russ Cohen, I'm Michael Agello. Thanks for watching, and remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey.